Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from Rao's IAS Study Circle. Join the official Telegram channel of Rao's IAS Study Circle to stay updated and get all the materials on the Telegram. The link to the channel can be found in the description box. Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading from our UPSC Civil Services examination perspective. So today, let us take up some of the important news which has appeared in the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 13th August 2021. The news to be discussed has been displayed on your screen and timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. So on this note, let's start our today's discussion. Now let's take up our first article for discussion appearing on page number 6. It says, Squaring Up to India's Education Emergency. Now this article effectively talks about the strict measures taken by Government of India during the lockdown period. And because of this, it impacted education the most. So this article highlights about the impact of education because of one of the strictest measures of lockdown taken by Government of India. Now, as you can see in this particular map, Stringency Index is a composite measures based on 9 response indicators including closure of schools. So this article has focused this parameter of closure of schools and how closure of schools has impacted education, especially during lockdown period. So from this particular news, you need to know about the Stringency Index, which is a part of Oxford Government Response Tracker and is calculated on 9 parameters. Now this index provides for a score ranging from 0 to that of 100, and a higher level of scores indicate higher level of strictness in response by the country. Now as you can see in this map, India is coded in deep red color, signifying that India's stringency score ranges on the higher note somewhere between 80 to 90. So this forms the crux of our discussion. So in the backdrop of Stringency Index, let's discuss this article from the perspective of steps taken by rest of the country during lockdown, impact of lockdown on children's education, concerns of online learning for education, and what needs to be done as a way forward provided in this article by the authors. Now we just discussed that Stringency Index is based on 9 parameters, and these 9 parameters include school and workplace closures, cancellation of public events, restriction on gathering size, closing of public transport, restrictions on internal movement and international travel, staying at home requirements, and public information campaigns. So these are the 9 parameters with respect to Stringency Index, and this is a part of Oxford COVID Government Response Tracker. And higher score in Stringency Index reflects higher level of strictness imposed by the respective government or respective country. Now regarding the stringency score of India, as you can see, it touched the maximum of 99, meaning that Government of India imposed one of the strictest measures for lockdown. So this tracker starts from February 2020 and ends somewhere around July of 2021. And as you can see that the measures for lockdown were extremely strict during March-April period of 2020. But these measures were later relaxed around the period of November-December 2020. And again the lockdown measures increased or became more strict during the period of March to April when India witnessed second wave. So with respect to the score as per Stringency Index for India, in June 2021 the score was as high as 82. In May 2021, the score was as high as 80, whereas in April 2021, the score was that of 71. So we see an increase in strictness of measures with respect to lockdown. So in the backdrop of the Stringency Index of India, this article focuses its impact on education, especially for school-going children. Now regarding the steps taken by other countries, India imposed the strictest measures for lockdown. And this was more strict even as compared to Brazil or even United States. So in this regard, this article highlights about total number of days for which schools were closed. And for India, it was the maximum with respect to 503 days, followed by Brazil, which was 495 days. So this article says that India's education policy response was almost similar to that of Brazil, despite less severity of disease witnessed in India as compared to Brazil. Now, this particular data also provides for a graded response in terms of grade 3 response, which is the most severe response, grade 2 response, and grade 1 response. So, in grade 3 response, it mentions about requiring closing of all levels of education. And as you can see, that India and Brazil both closed all levels of education for 404 and 406 days respectively, whereas less affluent countries such as Uruguay and even Vietnam provided for complete closure of their entire education only for 140 days and 212 days respectively. So this is where the author says that India did not take graded response as was done by other countries. As other countries with respect to graded response, especially European countries, they resumed in-person schooling for group of children. The article further says that even less affluent countries such as Vietnam and Uruguay took measured response with respect to education policy, and India's education policy can be said to be almost similar to that of Brazil. So overall, because of strictest measures taken by Government of India, this resulted in loss of 503 days for schooling for children. And there have been no days on which the government did not take any restrictive measures for education. So going by the stringency index, we understand that Government of India imposed one of the strictest measures for lockdown, and this also impacted the education of school-going children. Now coming to the second aspect of impact of lockdown on children's education. So because of lockdown, this impacted the youngest and the poorest children the most, especially children belonging to tribals or Dalit communities, or even children belonging to SC and ST communities. Further, children living in rural areas were also impacted, especially due to the problem of either network issue or electricity issues. So continuation of online classes for such children became difficult. Now, during the lockdown period, the aspect of digital divide on children's learning outcome was also witnessed, as children belonging to poor financial households whose parents could not afford online education dropped out from such system of online education, and this overall impacted the learning outcome of such children whose parents were not financially stable or whose parents did not have a secured livelihood. Now, another problem witnessed during lockdown was measuring of learning outcome, as there were no clear-cut guidelines or criteria to measure learning outcome of students, and this was despite the high usage of Diksha portal of government. So Diksha refers to digital infrastructure for school education, and Diksha is an initiative of National Council of Educational Research and Training, that is NCERT. So the Diksha platform offers engaging learning material, and these learning materials are as per the prescribed school syllabus or as per the prescribed school curriculum, and this is provided to teachers, students, and also parents. So despite high usage of Diksha portal, the government did not provide clear criteria with respect to measuring learning outcome of children. Now, impact on children's education brings us also to the concerns of online learning. Now, one of the concerns was highlighted by the report of Inter-American Development Bank, as the bank in its report concluded that students had learned only 27% of in-person equivalent with respect to remote learning. So this overall addresses or highlights the issue of learning gaps in children, especially when learning is done through online mode. Another aspect highlighted in this article is that the dropout risk with respect to online education mode increases 2.5 times as compared to in-person education. Now, an NGO, namely the National Coalition on Education Emergency, indicated that teachers are unprepared for online teaching, and also the fact that introduction of bridge course or remedial classes may not fill the void which has been left due to closure of schools for a very long period of time. And because of closure of schools for more than 1.5 years, the government not only decided to trim the syllabus or dilute the syllabus, but also allowed the students to pass the grade. Now, this may impact the student in the long run, especially regarding acquiring of necessary knowledge and skills. So these can be said to be some of the concerns of online education as has been highlighted in this particular article. So the question remains as to what needs to be done. So here the author has given certain important highlights with respect to what needs to be done. So there is a need for safe school opening and child support plan, and each school should receive technical help from the government. Further, an education emergency room should be set up in every district in order to coordinate, implement, and monitor local plans for school education. Further, the article says that there is a need for coordinating efforts in schools for health, sanitation, and transportation. Further, the local authorities needs to focus on such children who need these bridge courses or remedial classes, and they should also chalk out plans to address educational needs of such children who lag behind and they need those bridge courses. Further, the teachers need to identify the learning gaps of children, and the government should utilize these learnings of teachers not only to train them but also to encourage them in order to support the educational recovery of a child. Further, there is a need to develop appropriate tools to measure educational trajectory and also educational outcome of each student. Now, this problem was highlighted with respect to impact of lockdown on children's education, where measuring learning outcome was very unclear. So in this backdrop, the author highlights to develop appropriate tools so that educational trajectory and also educational outcome of students can be measured properly. And lastly, the author says that in order to improve India's stringency index, the government need to develop infrastructure of schools so that they can take graded action or they can start in-person teaching of group of students. And for this, there has to be a proper infrastructure along with proper health and sanitation measures which needs to be taken by every school in India. So implementing these best practices of the world will help to improve India's stringency index. And this will also help to impart quality education to our school going children. So these are some of the things which needs to be done in order to reduce India's stringency index, especially with respect to learning outcomes. So this article becomes important from the perspective of social justice under GS paper 2 under education. And based on our discussion, this becomes your practice question for your mains examination. It says that considering India's high score on stringency index, highlight the impact of learning outcomes for school going children and also suggest measures to improve India's stringency index. Now this question can be answered in 150 words. So after going through the important highlights of this article, let's take up our next article for discussion. The next article to be taken up also appears on page number 6. It says, Parliament is abdicating its oversight role. The monsoon session which has ended is another example of Parliament being quite ineffective in all its functions. So overall, this article highlights about decline in Parliament working hours, or we can say that decline in Parliament's productivity, as the productivity of Parliament was observed as low as 22%. Now of late, we are also witnessing certain increased disruptions in Parliament. And because of this, important issues having international and national implications could not be discussed, such as Chinese incursion into Ladakh, economic situation of India, rising prices of many essential items, and also farmers' problems, including the aspect of Pegasus snooping scandal. So in this regard, the author says that because of increased disruptions of Parliament, it leads to key issues not being discussed in detail in Parliament. Now another aspect which has been observed is regarding passing of bills, as bills are mostly passed these days without any proper discussion or without any scrutiny of these bills by relevant parliamentary committees. Now, as you can see in this particular table, this represents the percentage of bills which were sent to committees for examination or for scrutiny. Now with respect to 15th Lok Sabha from 2009 to 2014, 71% of the bills were sent to the select committees or different committees of Parliament for scrutiny and examination. However, the 16th Lok Sabha from 2014 onwards saw a decline of sending of bills to relevant parliamentary committees, as only 27% of the bills passed by the 16th Lok Sabha were given to the parliamentary committees for examination, and in the present 17th Lok Sabha, so far, only 12% of the bills have been referred to the parliamentary committees. So overall, we see that scrutiny and examination of key bills is also on a decline, as bills are not referred to the parliamentary committees for proper examination. Further, this particular table highlights about productive time in Lok Sabha from 3rd to 15th Lok Sabha. And as you can see that from 13th to 15th Lok Sabha, there has been a constant decline with respect to productive time spent in Lok Sabha. Another important point to be highlighted here is regarding the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th and even 9th Lok Sabha, as all these Lok Sabha saw a productive time spent of more than 100%. And if we compare these era as compared to the present time, then we see a proper decline in the functioning of Parliament or productive time spent in Parliament. Now this table further depicts the total hours of work done by Lok Sabha starting from 1st Lok Sabha to that of 16th Lok Sabha. And as you can see that during the first few Lok Sabha, the working hours were as high as 4,000 hours. And if we compare the working hours of initial Lok Sabhas as compared to the 13th, 14th, 15th and 16th Lok Sabha, then we notice a decline of roughly 50% in terms of functioning of Lok Sabha. So this decline of 50% in the functioning of Lok Sabha from what it used to be in the earlier Lok Sabha is definitely a matter of concern. Now another concern with respect to functioning of Lok Sabha is lack of proper debate and discussion. Now as you can see that 16th Lok Sabha passed 83% of the budget without discussion. Now this again is a matter of concern, as key aspects of India's finance are passed without proper discussion in the Parliament. Now similar concerns are also observed in the state assemblies of India, and this particular diagram highlights about average sitting of state assemblies from the year 2011 to 2017. Now the orange mark highlights the budget session and the blue mark highlight the non-budget session. And if we take a holistic picture, then more discussions are reflected for budget sessions as compared to non-budget sessions. So there is also decline in state assemblies with respect to discussion of key bills. So all these aspects cumulatively brings us to the question as to why this declining sittings of assemblies and parliament is a matter of concern. So the point highlighted with respect to concern in decline in functioning of parliament and state assemblies is that these lack of debates on key issues impacts governance, as important decisions on governance are passed by assemblies and parliament without due deliberation. And this lack of deliberation by representatives of citizens further impacts the ordinary lives of citizens in multiple ways, as key legislations impacting lives of citizens with respect to various aspects of governance are passed without discussing these aspects in detail. Further, lack of discussions in parliament also show a lack of concern by the elected members for their citizens. And the problem also is that there is no way to account for their performance deficit prior to 5 years. Now, different departments of the government pass their budget without proper discussion with respect to the need and utilization for such funds. No proper discussion on need and utilization of funds also impacts the accountability of departments with respect to their financial management. And this overall leads to results to disproportionate and unbalanced allocation of resources. Further, budget passed without discussion also shows lack of coordination with opposition members in parliament and state assemblies. And there has also been witnessed an increasing use of ordinance route under Article 123 and 213 to pass legislation by centre and states. So these can be some of the concerns with respect to declining functioning of parliament and state assemblies in India. Now, after understanding about the concerns, what we also need to go through is the need for parliamentary reforms in order to improve the functioning and productivity of parliament and also state assemblies. Now, in this backdrop, the Vice President of India, Shri Venkaiah Naidu, has proposed these important parliamentary reforms in order to improve the functioning and also productivity of parliament. So the first point highlighted is regarding need for both pre and post legislative impact assessment. Yes, there is a need for legislative impact assessment in order to ensure for the quality and informed lawmaking for creating awareness about that particular law. So the pre and post legislative impact assessment will ensure for quality and informed lawmaking for creating wider awareness about the targeted outcomes by bringing out social, economic, environment and also administrative impacts. And this process will also involve number of stakeholders in the process of lawmaking. And this will overall make the entire lawmaking process more deliberative in nature. The next point is with respect to ensuring effective functioning of department related standing committees of Parliament, and this can be done by giving them longer tenure of more than 1 year as of now. Further, academic specialists in their respective fields should be nominated and renominated in such department related standing committees for scrutinization of bills. The next aspect provided is regarding women reservation in Parliament and also State Assembly. And in this regard, the government must introduce a legislation in Parliament. Further, there is need to prescribe a minimum number of sittings of Parliament and State Assemblies by law, as this will solve the issue of quorum and also lack of attendance in Parliament and State Assemblies. Further, there is need for an enforceable code of conduct, and lawmakers should abide by the rules of the House, and political parties must take responsibility in this regard by evolving and enforcing a code of conduct for the members of Parliament and State Assemblies. Next, rules on interruptions of proceedings must take automatic effect on erring members, as this will ensure the disciplined functioning of Parliament and State Assemblies. Further, the political parties must come up with a roster system to ensure that at least 50% of their members in the legislatures are present all throughout the proceedings of the House. And the roster system will also address the issue of lack of quorum. Further, the aspect of attendance by members of Parliament and State Assemblies and also the extent of their participation must be published by secretariats of legislatures. Now, such publication of reports will further increase awareness about different members of Parliament and State Assemblies with respect to their views aired on different matters of discussion. Further, the senior members of Parliament and State Assemblies must provide opportunities to new entrants and also those who sit in the backbenches for discussion on various matters of national concerns. Next, steps must be taken to prevent criminalization of politics, and this can be done by following the judgments of Supreme Court, whereby Supreme Court has asked the political parties to introspect before giving tickets to people having criminal backgrounds. Further, there is a need to review anti-defection law as per the recommendation of Goswami Committee, and also Supreme Court judgments, whereby power to remove members under 10th schedule must be transferred to a tribunal. Further, there is a need to review the whip system in the present format, as it does not allow members from a political party to express their opinion freely if a whip has been issued in a particular aspect. Further, there is a need to create a separate tribunal for MPs to adjudicate serious criminal charges against such legislatures and also to decide matters related to elections. But for this purpose, there is a need for a constitutional amendment. Next, there is also need for codification of parliamentary privileges, as this will balance out the fundamental rights of citizens on one hand, and it will also ensure judicial review in cases of breach of privileges. So, codification of parliamentary privileges will ensure a proper balance between freedom of expression of citizens, right to life and personal liberty, fundamental rights of citizens to be brought before a judicial magistrate within 24 hours, and also right to file writ petition of habeas corpus in Supreme Court of India. And lastly, government must be responsive to the views and concerns of the opposition, and the opposition must participate in a responsible and constructive manner. Thus, these are some of the important parliamentary reforms as has been suggested by the Vice President of India. Now, based on our discussion, let's take up some questions asked by UPSC in the past. Now, let's take up these two questions asked by UPSC in the year 2017 and 2020. Now, both these questions looks almost similar. Let's read this question. This question asked in 2017 says that the main advantage of the parliamentary form of government is that options are given. Now, read this question asked by UPSC in 2020. A parliamentary system of government is one in which similar nature of questions asked in a different manner. So, the options given in 2017 were: first, or A, the executive and legislature work independently. B, it provides continuity of policy and is more efficient. C, the executive remains responsible to the legislature. And D, the head of the government cannot be changed without election. Now here the question was that main advantage of parliamentary form of government is that. In this, the correct answer becomes C. That is, the executive remains responsible to the legislature, as the legislature can remove the executive by passing no confidence motion. Now let's take up this question asked in 2020. This question says that a parliamentary system of government is one in which options are A. All political parties in the parliament are represented in the government. No, this is not true. B. The government is responsible to the parliament and can be removed by it. Now this option is almost similar to option C, but let's go through other option as well. Option C. The government is elected by the people and can be removed by them. No, this is incorrect, as the government cannot be removed by the people but rather by members of parliament by passing of no confidence motion. D. The government is chosen by the parliament but cannot be removed by it before completion of a fixed term. Again incorrect, as the government is not chosen by the parliament. So here the correct answer becomes B. That is, the government is responsible to the parliament and can be removed by it by passing the no confidence motion. Now this particular news also highlights that supplementary grants were also passed by this government without any due deliberation. So in this regard, let's take up these two questions asked by UPSC in 2012 and also in 2017. Now the question asked in 2012 was, which of the following are methods of parliamentary control over public finance in India? Again, the question asked in 2017 was, the Parliament of India exercises control over the functions of Council of Ministers through almost similar nature of questions. Options given in 2012 were, first, placing annual financial statement before the Parliament. Yes. B. Withdrawal of monies from Consolidated Fund of India only after passing the appropriation bill. Yes, this is also correct. Third, provision of supplementary grants and vote on account. Yes, this is also correct. Supplementary grant under Article 115 and votes on account under Article 116. Fourth, a periodic or at least mid-year review of program of the government against macroeconomic forecasts and expenditure by a parliamentary budget office. No, this is incorrect. No such activities take place. Fifth, introducing finance bill in the parliament. Yes, this is also correct. So if you would have left out option 4, you would have only left with option A. Hence, A becomes the correct answer. Now this question said the Parliament of India exercises control over the functions of Council of Ministers through. Options were, first, adjournment motion, second, question R, and third, supplementary questions. Question was, select the correct answer using the code given below. In this, the correct answer is D, that is all of the above. So we understand that functioning of Parliament and also parliamentary reforms becomes one of the key aspects of our syllabus, and number of questions have already been asked on the functioning of Parliament in the prelims examination. So a question in the mains can be asked with respect to the decline in productivity of parliamentary function and also need for parliamentary reforms. Thus this topic becomes important from the perspective of GS paper 2 under polity and governance, and questions can be asked with respect to the functioning of Parliament and also parliamentary reforms, both in the mains and also in the prelims examination. With this understanding of parliamentary reforms, let's take up our next article for discussion. Now after discussing the two articles in detail, let's take up our next three articles from a prelims perspective. So this news mentions about satellite mission, 2 stages completed but the third failed. GSLV F10 fails to put satellite into orbit. So according to this news, the third stage of GSLV F10 failed to put the satellite into orbit, and this third stage was cryogenic upper stage ignition. So in this news, you need to know about the 3 stages with respect to GSLV satellites, as questions can be asked in your upcoming prelims examination based on these stages and also the fuels used. So in the first stage, solid fuel is used, whereby chemical reactions in engine takes place in the solid state. Now the second stage is that of the liquid fuel, and this liquid fuel helps to cover long distance for the satellite. Now the third stage is for the cryogenic fuel. Now under cryogenic fuel, rapid reaction takes place in the satellite, and this rapid reaction can only take place at a very low temperature. So with respect to GSLV F10 satellite, this rapid reaction, which was supposed to take place at a very low temperature, could not take place, and thereby the cryogenic upper stage ignition could not function properly, leading to the failure of this particular satellite. So based on this information, let's take up this question asked by UPSC in the prelims of 2018. The question was, with reference to India's satellite launch vehicles, consider the following statements. First, PSLV, that is Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle, launched the satellites useful for Earth resources monitoring, whereas GSLVs are designed mainly to launch communication satellites. Yes, this statement is correct, as the GSLV F10 was supposed to launch the Earth observation satellite. And mainly GSLVs are used to launch communication satellites, whereas Polar Satellite Launch Vehicles are used for Earth resources monitoring satellites. Second, satellites launched by PSLV appear to remain permanently fixed in the same position in the sky as viewed from a particular location on Earth. No, this statement is incorrect, as this would be correct for GSLV satellites, because GSLV refers to geosynchronous launch vehicle. Now the term geosynchronous means that they are in sync with the rotation of the Earth, and therefore they appear fixed if viewed from a particular location on Earth. So the second statement becomes incorrect. Third, GSLV Mark III is a 4-staged launch vehicle. Now this here itself becomes incorrect, as it is a 3-staged launch vehicles, whereby the first stage uses the solid fuel, the second stage uses the liquid fuel, and the third stage uses the cryogenic fuel. So here the third statement becomes incorrect. So the question is, which of the statements given above are correct? So here the correct answer becomes A, that is 1 only. So you need to know about the stages of GSLV, as questions can be asked in your upcoming prelims examination with respect to India's satellite launch vehicles. Now let's take up our next discussion appearing on page number 1. It says retail inflation eases to 5.6% in July. Now as per this news, it says that retail inflation cooled slightly to 5.6% in July, slipping below the central bank's upper tolerance threshold of 6%. Now in this news, you need to understand certain important aspects with respect to headline inflation and core inflation. Now inflation is measured at consumer level and also at wholesale level. So the inflation measured at consumer level is referred as CPI or Consumer Price Index, and inflation measured at wholesale level is referred as Wholesale Price Index. Now CPI is measured by National Statistic Office under Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, whereas WPI is measured by Office of Economic Advisor under Ministry of Commerce and Industry. This becomes an important point from your examination perspective. Now there is a difference between headline inflation and core inflation. So headline inflation covers or includes all categories of goods and services, whereas core inflation excludes volatile categories of goods, namely food and fuels. Hence, a drastic fall in fruit or vegetable prices or even fuel prices will bring down the headline inflation, but the core inflation will more or less remain stable. Similarly, a rapid increase in the price of food or that of fuel will again increase the headline inflation, but again the core inflation would remain stable. So increase or decrease of prices in the volatile categories does not impact core inflation that much as it impacts the headline inflation. So this is the basic difference between headline inflation and core inflation. That is, under core inflation, it excludes volatile categories, namely that of food and fuels. So here the news says that the food prices at consumer level played a substantive role in moderating the pace of price rise in July, with the National Statistical Office estimating an inflation of 3.96% compared to 5.15% in June. It further says that vegetables, fruits, oils and fats, pulses, sugars and spices experienced significant tapering in inflation, an indication that some of the government measures to correct edible oil and pulses prices are kicking in. So here it is mostly talking about headline inflation. So from your prelims perspective, you need to know the difference between headline inflation and core inflation, and also that CPI is measured by NSO under Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, and WPI is measured by Office of Economic Advisor under Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Now this topic becomes important from the perspective of economy and also under GS paper 3. The last news to be taken up appears on page number 10, and it is with respect to the naval exercise currently carried on between India and Saudi Arabia. So it says that the sea phase of the 3-day long maiden bilateral exercise Al-Mohid Al-Hindi between the Indian Navy and Royal Saudi Naval Force commenced on 12th August 2021, and this took place off the coast of Al-Jubail. Now from your examination perspective regarding the location, you need to know about the location of Al-Jubail. As you can see in this map, this is the location of Al-Jubail around the Persian Gulf. So to reach Al-Jubail from India, you need to cross Gulf of Oman and then to the Persian Gulf. Further, one needs to cross Oman, UAE in order to reach the coast of Al-Jubail. So in this, you need to know the location of Al-Jubail and also the countries surrounding Saudi Arabia, namely Yemen, Oman, UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Iraq and Jordan. And also the fact that Saudi Arabia faces two water bodies in the east and also in the west. In the east, the Red Sea, and in the west, the Persian Gulf. So question based on locations can be asked with respect to the naval exercise currently being carried on between Indian Navy and Royal Saudi Naval Force off the coast of Al-Jubail. Now based on our discussion, this becomes your practice question for the day. It says, which among the following can lead to greater divergence between headline and core inflation in India? Options are A. Increase in food prices, B. Decrease in fuel prices, C. Stability in prices of non-volatile commodities, and D. Both A and B. Now coming to the answer of yesterday, the question was, consider the following statements related to International Criminal Court. First, the ICC is an organ of United Nations. No, this is incorrect as it was formed under Rome Statute. Second, India did not ratify Rome Statute and hence it is not a member of ICC. Yes, this statement is correct. So the question was, which of the statements given above are correct? So here the correct answer becomes B, that is 2 only. So with the question for the day, we come to an end to today's analysis. Thank you for watching DNS.